Now again, so standard webbing of British soldier in World War One was what they call the 08 pattern webbing equipment. Was a full set, cross straps, small pack, ammo pouches, belt, and an entrenching tool with its bag and its handle. Now, in 1923, after World War One, it was decided by the War Office, for some weird reason, that the British soldier no longer needed an entrenching tool. So the 08 pattern entrenching tool was struck off and technically no longer existed. Now, the 08 pattern entrenching tool has this metal kind of pickmatic head. The reinforcing strip is at the back to give it a bit of strength. The bag looks like the 37 pattern, but it isn't. The bag has these two wide buckles for it to go onto the wide webbing of the 08 pattern. One thing you notice about the bag is, although the bag holds the entrenching tool head, there's no provision on the bag to hold the wooden handle. In 08 pattern webbing, the wooden handle is actually held on some loops attached to the 08 pattern bayonet frog. So it's separate from the actual entrenching tool. Now in 1923, they decide, hey, we don't need these anymore. And I should point out that these are always dated in somewhere. That's dated Perks 1915. So they decide, we don't need this anymore. So while the experts are watching events unfolding in Europe in the 1920s, it becomes evident that the British Army needed an entrenching tool. Up until that point, they had no entrenching tool as part of its equipment. When the new 1937 pattern entrenching tool, when the new 1937 pattern equipment was introduced, which you all know what 37 pattern equipment is, there was no provision for an entrenching tool. It did not exist. Even so, that the official manual on the 37 pattern web equipment, printed in 1939, has absolutely nothing about an entrenching tool. None of the setup indicates an entrenching tool ever existed, which it actually didn't, because there's no need for an entrenching tool anymore. It became pretty evident soon from the shenanigans going on in Europe that the British soldier would in fact need an entrenching tool, because there's every possibility of being drawn into this thing called World War II. Now, what the War Office did, they looked at the typical spade-like entrenching tool used by most European armies. So the entrenching tool was called a liniment tool, which is your basic European style E-tool that's still in use today by people. This is a German one. It's been in there for over 100 years in its leather holder, and in fact it's actually, the holder is dated 1914 there. That cost me a tenner at the car boot sale. Anyway, the British government looked at these and thought, there seemed to be a good idea. So instead of the British government approaching various European nations and purchasing these in quantity, for whatever reason known only to themselves, the British decided to manufacture their own copy of this entrenching tool. So, in 1939, they bring out the 39 pattern entrenching tool, which is a whole British-made entrenching tool, made by two tool manufacturers, either Perks or Braids. The names and the dates are stamped into the head, but very, very faintly. They're either dated 39, 40 or 41. So we'll take a look at that in a bit of close-up. The 39 pattern entrenching tool was approved in January 1940. The 1939 pattern, however, due to its length, was found to be unsuitable for use by the British soldier on the 37 pattern webbing, because it hung down below the hip, and the length of it obstructed the soldier if he had to kneel down. So the War Office decided, we don't want that 39 pattern anymore, we need another setup. So we'll take a look at the 39 pattern. Now the 39 pattern has this cover. 39 pattern cover always has these brass buckles on the top. If you see one of these entrenching tool covers with two belt loops on it and not the brass work, what you've got is a 1950s Israeli Defence Forces cover, not a World War II 39 pattern cover. So the 39 pattern E-tool is a close relative to the European ones in use at that time. The holder kind of folds round crisscross fashion and you pull it out. It seems to be better constructed than its European brother, but it was soon found out that, as well as the length of it being unsuitable, because it would hang very far down the soldier, it was also found that without a pickmatic it was nearly impossible to start a hole with it. So the British struck them off and looked for another entrenching tool. So what they did was, they looked at the previous 08 pattern entrenching tool and decided to make a copy of it. The copy, which is called the 37 pattern entrenching tool, comes out in 1941. That made the 39 pattern obsolete, although the 39 pattern did see use by some of the British 5th Army troops in Sicily in 1943, and it's the only time they used in combat. And then it's mainly relegated to training purposes. So the 39 pattern is mainly relegated to training purposes, and then finally this gets struck off by the British government and is disposed of in 1947. So it's bye-bye 39 pattern E-tool. Now the 37 pattern is an update of the 08 pattern. Now officially the 37 pattern, which is this one here, the 37 pattern technically should have been called the 08 pattern Mark II. But in 1923 the War Office had already struck off the 08 pattern. So on paper the 08 pattern didn't exist. So they couldn't call it the 08 pattern Mark II. So even though it comes out in 1941, because it fits the 37 pattern webbing equipment, it was called the 1937 pattern entrenching tool, and that's why it's called that. The set would be issued from 1941 well into the 1950s, so you get them with all sorts of dates. Usually the head has been a slight modification of the World War I 08, but it's a brand new head for World War II. And the modifications carried out is that the surrounding has a much stronger kind of rounded section to it, as opposed to the World War I version is kind of more or less straight across. This is more for reinforcement, and also the reinforcing rib on the back of the World War I version was deemed unsuitable, so they moved the reinforcing rib to the front. And of course this one's marked by braids dated 1944. You also get them marked by perks. So basically that is an improvement of that. Also the bag, they couldn't use any stocks of 08 pattern because the buckles were made for the 08 pattern. Not so good on the 37 pattern. Also no provision on the bag for holding the E-tool handle. The 37 pattern one is very similar, but it has smaller buckles for the 37 pattern webbing equipment, and more importantly, there is a provision on the bag, 2 loops for holding the e-tool handle. So the e-tool handle now, instead of being on the bayonet frog of the SMLE bayonet, can now be carried as one complete unit, and where it's worn, it doesn't obstruct the soldier anymore. So the 39 pattern entrenching tool, you will always find them date stamped and makers marked on the blade, but they're very, very faintly marked and extremely difficult to see. So I'll see if I can find this one. Yeah, this one. Appears to be stamped. Where are you? There. It's very difficult to see, but it is actually, it's War Office stamped there with the broad arrow stamped. It's marked braids or perks, I think it's perks, and dated 40 on there. Very, very difficult to see. So these are struck off in 47 and they kind of vanish. And then they start turning up on the collector circuit in the 80s and 90s. And what people notice is, carved into the handle are 2 initials and a number. And all the experts jumped on it and says, well, this is obviously the guy's initials and it's his service number. And then another one turned up with the same initials and the same number. And another one turned up with the same initials and the same number. And everybody was on the opinion that, hang on a minute, how can it be the same guy? Because he can't have been issued multiple entrenching tools. And what they found out was the 39 pattern entrenching tool, when it was struck off by the British, was sold to the Dutch, and the Dutch gave them to their civil defence. And the 2 letters carved into the handle were the letters RP, and they weren't actually somebody's initials. What they were an abbreviation for the Dutch word Raupensplange, which is Dutch for digging tool, and the number was the Dutch Civil Defence's store number for that particular digging tool. So those numbers and initials were added after the war by the Dutch as a serial number for the store purposes. So some of them will have RP and the number carved into it, indicating it's ex-Dutch Civil Defence. This one doesn't, it's escaped it. So it's rare not to have one of these with no carving on the handle. So if you ever find one with RP and a number, it's not the guy's name and service number, it's Raupensplange, Dutch Civil Defence for digging tool. So yeah, so that's the 39 pattern entrenching tool. There are, on the reenactor circuit, the likes of Soldier of Fortune are selling modern European e-tools that look like this, with a reproduction 39 pattern bag for reenactment purposes. I mean, they don't pretend they're originals. They're selling them as reproductions. So if you buy one from Soldier of Fortune, you're buying a modern European one in a repro bag. Do you need an original one? Well, I collect Militaria, and I have, you know, different patterns of British e-tools. So to me, yes. To a reenactor, do you need one? You don't really need one, because apart from being used in Sicily in 43 for whatever reason by the 5th Division, they never actually saw combat, and they were very quickly disposed of and replaced by the British version. The entrenching tool handle went through a couple of changes. This one, there's no actual date on it, but that's how no, that's not the one. That's how they originally looked. In some instances, you may find a hole bored through this end. That was to hold a wrist thong, because this heavy weighted bit that goes through the e-tool, this weighted heavy bit here that goes through the e-tool, not only acts as the keeper for the e-tool, the more you go bang, 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 the tighter that gets on there. So not only does it act as a keeper for the e-tool itself, when the e-tool isn't with it, and you have a hole bored through there and a thong on it, it makes quite a hefty thing for cracking people over the head. And these were used by British soldiers on picket duty. as a form of defence. And I quite clearly remember my dad in Malta in the 50s National Service during the Malta riots being on picket duty with one of these things. Now, it was quickly found out that while that bit was handy, this bit was a waste of time. It needed something on there. So they decided in 1944 to modify this. And in 1944, as you've seen in the previous video, they were given a fitment on it, a bit like the fitting on the number 4 rifle. And that, as I mentioned in the Telemine video, was to give the soldier the ability to fit the standard pattern pig sticker bayonet. And again, there you go. That gives every British infantryman the ability, as I mentioned in that video, to use it as a mine probe. And not like some dealers say, a rare home guard defence weapon. I mean, we can talk about them now. Worldwide Arms used to have bayonets that you couldn't sell, separate handles they couldn't sell, and they put them together and sold them in their catalogue as rare home guard defensive weapons. And that's where that legend came from. It was made up by Worldwide Arms Limited. So that's not a home guard defence weapon, irrespective of what people say. That's just a modified entrenching tool handle in 1944 that gives every British soldier the ability to use it as a mine probe, as we've discussed in the previous Telemine 35 video. So that is all of the entrenching tools, 08, 39, 37 pattern, and the World War I German 1914 dated one. On today's market, you do find these in relic condition, very solid World War I examples. They're not very expensive. A bag like that now, you're looking at £300. These wooden handle things, again, they're not expensive. I remember buying these for £1 each. The ones with the bayonet adapter may be a bit more expensive. The World War II sets are always sold in sets. I can remember buying sets of these weapon equipment, 37 pattern, from what was his name, PG Wing, who used to advertise in Gunmart. I bought umpteen sets of these, complete mint condition, for £10 each. Now they're about 150 quid for a set, £60 upwards, let's say. But what you need to watch out for is the 37 pattern e-tool bag. This bag here is the proper World War II issue. You see, if you have that buckles through there to hold it in place, to hold the e-tool head in the bag. If you have this bag and you find that this bag has an additional strap that comes over and fits with a popper stud, what you've got is a post-war modified one. Even though the bag may be World War II dated, the addition of an extra strap that comes over and attaches with a popper is a post-war modification to hold the e-tool head better in the bag. It's not, as some dealers try to make out, a rare airborne version or a rare commando version. It's just a post-war modification. So don't go paying any more money for something with an extra strap that you've been told is a rare airborne thing. It's not. It's just a carry-on. It's just a standard modification of a wartime example to give it a bit more life. So they did go well into the 1980s with cadets and things like that. Then they were all declared surplus. You always find that they are dated in one way or another. That one is 43 dated inside there. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you may or may not get a maker's mark and a date on these things. I think there may or may not be a maker's mark and no date on this thing. There's a broad order stamp there, maker's mark and a date, which is pretty indistinct on there. So yeah, so that's the e-tools covered. So I don't think there's anything more to say on these, but yeah, so you know what to look for when you're out and about. So this, for example, there's two examples of World War tunics. That's Second World War Border Regiment. This is First World War Border Regiment, and this has the added appeal that this one has a French commercially made armoured vest made for sale in Britain. There's full maker's tab on the back of it as well. It's supposed to have this armoured vest, to save you asking, it's supposed to have another section that goes around the guy's neck, a separate bit, but it doesn't. The only place I've seen an identical one of these is in the Imperial War Museum. So that's a French made genuine World War I armour plated vest and 08 pattern equipment and 37 pattern equipment. So that is the 1908 pattern, 1939 pattern, 1937 pattern entrenching tool. And like I say, the 39 pattern, you'll get them dated 39, 40 and 41. I did miss the chance of 2 of these on eBay a couple of years ago. I took them to £90 each and didn't get them. A couple of weeks later, I was at a military fair down south somewhere, and a guy had 2 on his stall, and I recognised them as being the actual 2 that I missed on eBay. Now, bearing in mind I got outbid at 90 quid, I asked the guy, how much is your 39 pattern E-tool? Oh, it's very rare, he hit back with. They're £200 each. I went, oh, thank you very much. Then, about a fortnight later, this one turned up on eBay at a £75 buy now. So I thought, good investment that. So I bought it. Like I say, it's something, you don't actually need one. But, like I say, I've got variants of variants. And it's just nice to have an example of the type. And, like I've said, the 37 pattern E-tool was bought as a complete set back in the day when you could. Bought in the 1990s from PG Wing for like £20 a set. Now 60 to 150 quid. World War I examples, you very rarely get a complete one. And the head turns up as a relic, 15-20 quid, can be cleaned up nicely. The actual bag, you better off just buying repro sets when it comes to the white pattern webbing, because a full size set of original costs a friggin' fortune. So yeah, so that's where we're at with the webbing equipment. So I don't know what I should do. We'll see what we should do next. I have a few jobs on today, Sunday, so this might be the only video that I managed to get uploaded. So we'll see how it goes anyway. So this has been my ramblings on the 08, 39 and 37 pattern webbing equipment, and it's a Curtry months. So I hope you're still awake at the end of this 23-minute long video. Bye for now.